Hello, everyone. My name is David Lee, and I am one of the founders of Intervention Services and Coaching. And today, what we're going to talk about, or what I'm going to talk about, is perhaps one of the least understood, and what we believe as the one of the most important parts of the services that we offer, which is called family recovery coaching. And a lot of people, when we use that term family recovery coaching, they automatically assume that what we're talking about is doing recovery coaching on their loved one, like the addict or the substance abuser. Hey, David, are you going to talk to Joe? Hey, David, are you going to call Joe? And in the majority of the cases outside of the face-to-face intervention, rarely do we interact with Joe. A lot of people are like, well, why wouldn't you talk to Joe? Why wouldn't we put all of our attention on Joe? Family recovery coaching for us is like an up to a year ongoing collaboration with families. Why wouldn't you spend all of that year? David, you've been in multiple treatment, you work in treatment, we own a couple treatment places. A recovery coach, interventionist, all that stuff. Like, you're the expert. If you could just sit across from Joe, Joe will change, And so, to really understand what family recovery coaching is for us, and why most of our focus is not on Joe, believe it or not, most of our focus is on the family around Joe. You'd have to understand, go back in time to when I first started doing interventions. I first started doing interventions over 20 years ago. And realistically, at the time, in retrospect, I was probably just pretty good at talking somebody into going to treatment, and it all anchored around that. If we just got to that living room, me as a recovering addict, who'd been to treatment before, who's been in recovery, if you could just get me in front of him or her, I could connect with them. I understand how you feel. I understand the struggles. I understand how hard it is. Trust us in this move. And then, so later over time, it evolved, right? It wasn't just me talking to Joe. We would do things like read letters, beautiful letters that were read to lay a little bit of a foundation. We would set ground rules. So 20 years ago, interventions for us were 90% focused on a 1, 2, or 3 day event. 90% of all our focus and energy was on that 1, 2, or 3 days. And then everybody kind of like steps back. Your loved one's in treatment, or we're in kind of boundary stages. And that was kind of it. Sometimes we would hear from families, a day or a week or a month. That was kind of common. 6 months later, out of sight, out of mind. However, it was not unheard of for us to hear, because statistically, a lot of people do struggle. Oh, he was doing so well. Hi, David. Hey, do you remember me? It's Martha, or it's June. Do you remember me? You did an intervention a year ago. You did an intervention 3 months ago. You did an intervention 2 months ago. And he was doing really well. And, this happened and this happened, and now he's in our basement again, getting loaded, Sometimes there was some generic plans that we had created in advance. Joe was going to go to rehab. Joe was going to go to sober living. Joe was going to get a therapist. Joe was going to get on Vivitrol, Suboxone, nothing. And the next thing you know, Martha's calling me and Joe's in the basement. Like, how did Joe get in the basement? And so 20 years ago, so much of our focus was in creating this singular moment of change, and hoping that it was powerful enough, with some guidelines and some boundaries, a little covenant that we set with the family, that hopefully the family would maintain that. Hopefully Joe would have enough upward mobility, and that voila, it would work, right? Statistics back then, 80 to 90% of people on a day of an intervention will go to treatment, roughly, depending on age and demographic. But let's just say it's 80 to 90%, whatever. And that's the statistic that so many people focus on. What's your success rate? What is the success rate? In retrospect, the what is the success rate shows either a fundamental misunderstanding or a marketing strategy. 80 to 90% of people go to treatment. It's relatively easy to kind of ram somebody into treatment via ultimatums, interventions, forcing, this kind of thing. The real challenge over the last 20 years has been, how do we get somebody to want to be not only in treatment, but want to be in the next phase, which is recovery? And so the evolution of intervention services has gone from this hyper focus on the front end and then kind of a letting go to much more of a focus on a long-term sustained change within a family system, so that days, weeks, months, years from now, we're no longer necessary because the family has changed their relationship with the substance abuser, the mentally struggling, or whatever it is. And so I'll give you some insight into what I mean by that. I went through a lot of treatment, more than most human beings on the planet. And so because of that, if you hear any of my story or watch any of my other videos, I went to over 24, a lot. A lot of people are like, oh my goodness, you went to so many treatment. Like, what happened? Well, my family ended up in two states of being. They either ended up in high crisis. Oh my goodness, David's getting loaded. What are we going to do? And everyone's kind of in a little bit of a panic. Or one person's in a panic trying to deal with it solo. And all they care about is, what can we do right now to deal with the crisis right now? What can we do to get him into a treatment program right now? What can we do to convince him he needs to get sober, he disappeared, he's on drugs again, whatever it is. And so high crisis, high panic, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get me somewhere, anywhere. Detox, it didn't even matter, just somewhere. And then there was the other state of being, which is, everything's kind of okay right now. Let's not make things worse. Let's fingers crossed. Let's hold our breath and hope that it's working. Doing well, not doing well. Doing well, not doing well. But if you were to look in my family system, there was never a big plan. There was never a big picture. There was never a, what are you going to do in 3 weeks? What are you going to do in 5 weeks? What are you going to do over the next year if this thing happens, right? They were just kind of, hope it works. Hope that it works. And they hinged their serenity on my sobriety. And they kind of lived their life like that. And a lot of family systems are. A lot of family systems are so hyper-focused, and even when they hire interventionists, they're hyper-focused on, what can we do to get them to go? What are we going to do to get them to quit? What are we going to do to get them to this? And it's impossible for a family system that hasn't been through the entire spectrum to look ahead. And so what family recovery coaching is that, I don't know if this number's changed or not, but realistically, there's about 14,000 state-licensed addiction treatment centers of some type in the continental United States, including outpatient detoxes, residential inpatients, PHPs, all that stuff. So 14,000. Where I'm sitting right now, within 100 miles of me, there are probably over 1,000 support group meetings this week. Celebrate Recovery, AA, NA, Smart Recovery, Recovery Dharma, Refuge Recovery, all that stuff. Within 100 miles of where I'm sitting right now, there are probably 1,000 therapists, addictionologists, psychologists. Within 100 miles of me right now, there are probably 10,000 potential sponsors, mentors, recovery coach, people that have had some success in sobriety. So there's all that, right? But when it comes to family resources, who does the family call within that 100 miles? The answers are scattered and exceptionally limited. of those 14,000 treatment centers, how many treatment centers are there for families? You know, where does a family go? Where does a family go for ongoing support, ongoing education? Where does a family go to get the answer to a handful of questions? What do I do right now? My loved one just came home from treatment and they have liquor in their breath. What do I do? My loved one is in treatment right now and they said they're going to leave. What do I do? The treatment center recommended 90 days. My loved one says there's no way they're going to do 90 days. What do I do? My loved one stole my car. My loved one refuses to get on naltrexone. My loved one refuses to go to therapy. My loved one refuses to go to support groups. What do I do, right? And so the answers to that question are either a Google search or I don't know what to do, you know? And so the sad part about family systems and families is that if I look at my family and most of the families that I talk to, my family put exceptionally much more work, time, energy, and money into my recovery or my sobriety than I did. And this is often the case for many of the families that we talk to. I talk to families who have probably spent 50 hours Googling, talking to professionals, talking to treatment centers, and their loved one has spent 0 hours sitting downstairs on the couch getting loaded. And so what happens a lot of times is these families work all these hours, they're Google searching, they're reading books, they're watching the shows, they're doing all this stuff. They're begging, they're pleading. They reach in their back pocket and pull their money and hire perhaps a service like ours or for treatment itself, and not an insignificant amount. And they put all this time, energy, and money, and their loved one walks in the door of treatment, and treatment slams the door in the face of the family. Now, they don't really do it, and they're not like me, like, be gone. But they kind of slam the door. And there are reasons for it. There are privacy issues, there's confidentiality. At the end of the day, Joe is the patient. Regardless of who paid, regardless of if mom spent 1,000 hours talking to that intake person, the minute Joe enters in, that door is mostly closed. And we try to explain to families that the 8 hours that Joe's in and out of groups all day today, you're not going to get all the detailed information. You're not going to get those case notes. How was Joe in group 1 or group 2 or group 3? You're going to get a generic. And it really isn't because treatment centers don't care. It's just, the client or the patient isn't the family, it's Joe. And from a logistical standpoint, it is impossible to have a permanent human being that can answer all of the calls all the time and create that two-way flow with a family. Smaller treatment centers can kind of do it a little more effectively, but when you're like an 80-bed treatment center, think about that. 80 beds, 80 clients, times 80 families. And let's say there's 2 or 3 engaging family members in each family system. Mom, dad, perhaps a sister or brother or a spouse. That's 240 human beings to talk to in a week. 240 phone calls. And to hire enough staff to be able to navigate through 80 to 240 hours per week to keep a family updated is unrealistic. And so, unfortunately, the way things are is things are uneven. Families put in all this work, all this time, energy, and money. They're usually the most willing to do whatever it takes. The clients themselves are a little more resistant, and there creates this wall. And so, back in the day, 20 years ago, what we did a lot of times with families is we just kind of like suggested they all go to Al-Anon. And Al-Anon's a 12-step support group that came about for spouses of alcoholics. And it serves a purpose. There are many people that have really, really gotten a lot of benefit from Al-Anon. But Al-Anon, isn't necessarily effective for everybody in a family system, nor is every family member really going to be attending ongoing Al-Anon support groups. So there really isn't a place for families to collaborate together. If I have a family, let's take my family for example. My dad's down in Florida, my family's in my mom's in the Midwest, my brother's over there, I got an uncle up in Michigan, I got people scattered all around, right? How are they all going to operate as a team? Are they all going to drive in their car and go to the same Al-Anon meeting? Probably not. Let's say my mom decided she was going to hire a therapist, right, to help her through this. Does this particular therapist understand addiction, or are they more of a marriage and family therapist, right? Where do they understand? What's their flavor? Are they here to help mom, or are they here to help her to understand my addiction, my relationship? And let's say she did hire that person. Does that mean my uncle and my dad and my brother are all going to drop her and join my mother in that therapy room? Probably not. It's just not realistic. And so what happens a lot of times is with family systems is you end up siloed and splintered. No one's really operating on the same page. No one's really getting the same kind of help. Treatment centers at best might have either one or two kind of phone calls to let you know how your loved one's going. They may have what's called like a family weekend or a family education or a family support thing. You know, with technology nowadays, people can kind of zoom in. But realistically, the options for family are exceptionally limited. And so what happened in the universe, and even those of us that did or do interventions, kind of created this. We were a part of what was a broken system that didn't really work well with each other. Treatment Center A doesn't really collaborate with Treatment Center B. They don't necessarily collaborate all that well with the family system, the same family system that I left to go to treatment, and the same family system I'm going to go back to. We create generic rules, you know. Sober living houses have kind of picked up on kind of a part of that. Instead of people going straight home, they move into sober living. And so there's a lot of different like fractured pieces of it, just because that's just the way the landscape looks. And so for us, what family recovery coaching evolved into was this ongoing collaboration over a year. It was, can we fill in the blanks for where this fragmented industry there's just no services there for people. You know, can we sit in the interim and co-create with families our own form of support? Can we create that moment so that every mom or every spouse or every family member or friend has the ability to get the answer on an ongoing basis for up to a year of, oh my goodness, this is what's happening. What do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next? You know, it's the morning. I'm kind of doing these videos sometimes in the morning. And so just this alone, just through coincidence, we're heading into a holiday weekend. Just this weekend alone, just this moment while I've been on here, I've gotten 4 group texts, right, from families that we've been working with for over the last year, for this last several months. Sometimes those group text questions are super simple. You know, hey everybody, time to take a vote. You know, so-and-so wants to leave treatment early because of the holidays. What do you think we should do? And we take little bits of votes. Sometimes we do ongoing weekly Zoom meetings because some people prefer that, and we kind of set an intention. What we do is we co-create together a changing in a family system on the relationship of us with someone's substance use. We try to shift it out of the realm of consistent crisis management, or fingers crossed, nothing's happened. Oh my God, what do we do right now? We try to be proactive and look ahead. My job in many cases is to look ahead for what may happen. For example, I'll just give you an example. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, there's a series of interventions that are almost always going to happen with a later stage alcoholic. Let's say you're an older alcoholic, let's say you're in your 50s, you've been drinking for 20 years, and let's say you're a daily drinker, right? Or let's say you're an opiate addict, or let's say you're a benzo addict, right? Xanax and Valium or Klonopin. It is a fact that even if we create the most magical intervention moment, oh my God, they're crying. Hallelujah. I see the light. I'm going to go. I'm going to surrender forever. I will never drink again. I will go to your treatment center. And they wander in. And everyone hugs and we drive. And it's this magical moment. It's a beautiful cathartic thing. The letters are read. It's so sacred. And that happens a lot. It happens much more than you realize. But here's the reality. Here's what I have learned over 20 years. That beautiful cathartic moment of change, that divide that we've created, will lose its thunder somewhere around day 2 or 3 in detox. As the alcohol and drugs are wearing off, as some of the withdrawal medication they're giving me is minimizing, my anxiety is going up, my sleep is messy, I haven't slept in a couple days, I got this stupid roommate, my consistent social rhythms have changed. I'm restless, I'm irritable, I'm craving. I don't know that I'm necessarily craving. I'm just foul, and I'm looking around at this place, and it sucks. Just sucks, and I'm thinking, there's no way I can do 28 days of this crap. And so the second intervention is about to happen, which is in this moment I'm thinking about leaving. I may actually be talking to my spouse and telling them that I can't do it. I promise you that I'm not going to drink. I've got it out of my system. 3 days sober. I'll never drink again. I now realize how serious it is. But I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. Our model of intervention is that addicts, alcoholics, whatever term you want to use, have become addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, solutions. And so when my anxiety's an 8, I got to get out of here. And so intervention 2 is 2-3 days into detox. Intervention 3, if I do stay, is somewhere about a week into it. I look ahead and I start to realize that, I start to only see why I don't fit here. I look at that guy as a 19-year-old heroin addict. I've got a job. I don't really belong here. I start to look at things through a negative lens, and I start to divide the treatment center into pieces. And I start to hear things that I disagree with. They're talking about the disease of addiction. They're talking about this, that, and the other thing. And I'm about a week into this place, and I start hearing other people talk about staying for longer than 28 days. Longer. Like there's a guy over there, he's been here for 45 days. And I start to realize that apparently if I'm really, really sick, they're going to try to convince me to stay longer. And so I start to try to instinctively shorten what could be a lengthier stay in my affect. No, I'm not craving alcohol. No, I'm good. No, I'm good. I start to lose some of my authenticity. I start to push back on any suggestions. Usually about roughly 1 to 2 weeks, we start hearing from the client that they don't think they're going to be able to stay the full 28. That they might stay for another week or so. Maybe they'll do 2 weeks, but they're not going to stay. So remember, they committed 100% in the beginning, but now all of a sudden there's some resistance. Somewhere around week 3, there's another kind of intervention, if you will. And interventions are really when we're trying to nudge somebody outside their comfort zone, both in treatment and outside of treatment. And what it is I'm sitting around this place and I'm starting to realize that they're encouraging not only for me to finish this rehab, but they're encouraging me to go to some sober living afterwards. Or they're encouraging me to get on medication afterwards, or they're encouraging that I go to these support group meetings every stupid day for like ever. And so all this extra stuff that they're adding on at the end, I'm not like a part of. And so somewhere around week 3, I in treatment am going to start engaging with their aftercare planning. And the aftercare planning is going to be like, hey, we recommend you get a therapist. We recommend you get on naltrexone. We recommend you go to support groups. Have you thought about a halfway house? We recommend you go to IOP afterwards. We recommend. And I'm going to note most of it. You as my family, if you don't know, you're not aware that all this is kind of the standard suggestions. And I'm noping all of it. And all you know is that, it's like 21 days and 7 more days I'm coming home. How was it? Did it work? And I come home. You might kind of guess that I'm supposed to do some stuff. Hey, aren't you supposed to go like those meetings and stuff? And I'm like, I've been to a month of meetings, I'm good. I didn't really like those meetings. Those meetings make me think about drinking. All they do is talk about alcohol and stuff. Okay, well, maybe that's not such a good idea. And so family recovery coaching for us is a focus on the family itself, to give families what they don't actually have out there in the universe that easy. For Joe can walk out the front door and within a block find a recovery coach, an addictions therapist, a sponsor, a mentor, a pastor. He can find so much help for his substance use disorder. I have millions of options today. All you have to do is do Google search. What does mom have? Well, who does mom have to call in that moment? Mom's Anonymous? Perhaps she's wandered into an Al-Anon meeting. She just doesn't like it. Doesn't feel like it fits. Some of the support groups she's tried just don't quite land that well. So who does she turn to? In more often than not with families end up siloed as a result of someone's addiction. In the beginning, addiction connected me with people around me. In the end, it takes that away. And it not only disconnected me from those around me, but it began to disconnect my family. My brother's resentful at my mother for not setting boundaries. My mother's keeping secrets from my father. Don't tell your father, that when I gave you this money, or don't tell your father. And so it creates all these secrets and disconnects and silos. My mom's ashamed because she let me back in the house, and she's tired of everybody saying, I can't believe what you did. My spouse, is ashamed to tell other people that, she hasn't kicked me out. They're all like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you kicking him out? And so there's all these little splintered silo pieces. And the loneliness of a mom or a spouse or a father, the loneliness, eventually, sooner or later, you end up with no one to talk to. And instead, you're just Google searching, perhaps making some random calls, grateful that any intake person or any treatment center is willing to give you the time of day. And so for us, family recovery coaching is this up to a year thing, a gift that my mom didn't get when I was 19 years old. When I was 19 years old, I went to my first treatment program, and they slammed the door in her face in a loving way as I wandered my suitcase in, and she drove away. I do think she used to go to I think they had like a family group every Thursday or something, and it was like 80 people it wasn't 80, but I remember it being 80 of us sitting in a circle, and a therapist, and they'd answer questions, and then she would drive back home. I don't remember what they recommended back then. I guess they probably recommended sober living. They probably recommended therapy, medication, and support groups. how much of that did I do on that first treatment center? And the answer is not really much of anything. And my mother, here's an interesting thing. The minute I left treatment, my mother couldn't call the treatment place. She couldn't call my primary therapist. She couldn't call the place and say, hey, can I ask you a question? David is this, David is that. Here's what David says. There's nobody to call. She was on her own. And the best that they had back then is fingers crossed, hope that it works. Doing well. Oh my God, not doing well. What do we do this time? Should we send him back to the same place? Do we maybe miss something? Do we send him out of state? Do we send him downstate? Do we send him to outpatient? She didn't really have any answers, you know. So what family recovery coaching is kind of a commitment to the families and the moms and the spouses and the husbands and the dads and the brothers and the families, to give them something that she didn't have, which is, as we're navigating through this stuff, before planning the intervention, the face-to-face intervention, after the intervention, days, weeks, months after the intervention, the ability to pick up this call, this phone, and text, Merry Christmas. It's been almost a year since we started. Praying 2024 holds some of the progress we have been praying for. This is from a family. We've been together for over almost a year. And I just got that text 2 minutes ago. It's pretty cool. And so there will be a whole bunch of those right there. Today I will be on group text. Today I will be in phone calls. Today we will be on some Zooms as we head into a holiday. And hopefully at the bare minimum, some of these families will feel less alone, a little more hopeful, a little more understanding, that perhaps this year can be different than the year before. And so hopefully I wasn't too confusing on helping you understand what family recovery coaching is. If your loved one needs a recovery coach, yes, I'm a recovery coach and all that stuff. I'm not the best on the planet. I'm pretty good at what I do. But at the end of the day, what I really, really love to do is do family recovery coaching. I love to talk to families about what to do next and give them a little bit of hope. And that it may seem uncertain right now. But some of the things that are happening are a little more predictable. There's a bit of a science. My job is to look ahead and forewarn you. This is what's going to happen next week. This is going to happen next month. Here's the things to watch for. Is this good news? Is this bad news? Is this a good sign? Is it not? And so again, I decided to do this on a holiday weekend, and whether it is a holiday right now when you're watching this or not a holiday when you're watching this, there is hope, and you don't have to feel quite so alone. So for those of you that are kind of looking into this stuff, there is a lot of cool stuff out there. It's just challenging when all you have is a keyboard and an internet search. So anyway, again, my name is David Lee. I'm one of the founders of Intervention Services and Coaching, and I certainly hope that this video helps and gives you a little bit of help, a little bit of hope. So that's kind of all I got. Thank you.